When I got sick, I thought the worst part would be the illness itself. I never imagined the real pain would come from watching my own wife slowly step away when I needed her most. Looking back now, I can still feel that moment when everything in my life started to fall apart. Not all at once. Not in some dramatic explosion. It happened quietly, like something cracking beneath the surface that I didn't even know was fragile.
Welcome to my channel Tales Beyond the Porch. I have set the stage and let's hear it from our narrator.
My name is Luke. I'm 38 years old, and until last year I thought my life was stable. I lived in a small rental house on the edge of a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was ours. I worked at a mid-sized tech company doing system support and network maintenance. Long hours sometimes, but steady work. Reliable paychecks. Health insurance. I used to think that kind of stability meant safety. I was wrong. It started on a regular Tuesday afternoon. I remember feeling unusually tired at my desk. Not normal tired. It felt heavier than that. Even walking to the break room felt like my legs were made of concrete. I brushed it off at first. Maybe I hadn't slept well. Maybe I was stressed. By the time I drove home that evening, I was shivering, even though it wasn't cold. The next morning, I woke up with a fever and a tight pressure in my chest that made breathing feel wrong. Not impossible, just wrong enough to scare me. My manager insisted I take sick leave. I told him I'd be back in a few days. A few days turned into 2 weeks. The fever wouldn't fully break. The fatigue felt endless. Some mornings I could barely sit up without feeling dizzy. I tried answering emails from home, but even reading a few lines made my head spin. The company sent polite messages at first, asking how I was feeling. Then the tone shifted. More formal, more distant. Then the call came. They were restructuring. Several positions were being eliminated. Mine was one of them. I remember sitting on the couch after that call ended, staring at the blank TV screen. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even shocked. I just felt hollow. In less than a month, I had gone from being a reliable employee to being replaceable. When I told my wife, Ada, she didn't yell. She didn't blame me. She just nodded slowly and said, "I see." Then she went to bed early. That was the first moment I felt something shift between us. At first, she tried to be supportive. She brought me soup. She asked about the doctor's appointments. But after the second week, her patience faded. She didn't say it directly, but I could feel it. Every sigh when I asked for help. Every glance when I struggled to stand up too fast. I hated feeling weak in front of her. I hated needing help. But what hurt more was realizing she was starting to see me differently. Not as her husband. Not as her partner. As a problem. Some nights, the fatigue hit so hard I couldn't even walk to the kitchen without stopping to catch my breath. My chest would tighten, and anxiety would creep in like a shadow. I tried not to show it. I didn't want to scare her. Or maybe I didn't want to confirm what she was already thinking. One evening, I felt the room tilt around me. My vision blurred for a second, and I had to sit down on the floor just to steady myself. Ada wasn't home. She had started spending more time out, saying she needed space to think. I texted her that I wasn't feeling well. No response. I don't remember exactly why I did it, but I texted her older sister, Tiffany, too. We weren't close. We only saw each other during holidays or family dinners. Small talk. Polite smiles. She called me back within a minute. 10 minutes later, she was at my door with a pharmacy bag and a worried look on her face. She helped me sit up, checked my temperature, made me drink water. She didn't act dramatic. She didn't panic. She just stayed calm. "You're not alone, Luke," she said before leaving that night. "I'll check on you tomorrow." Those words stayed with me. Over the next few weeks, my health moved in slow circles. Some days felt slightly better. Other days knocked me right back down. I tried to clean the house once, just to prove I could. I made it halfway through the kitchen before I had to sit down again. Ada stopped asking how I was feeling. If she came home, she went straight to the bedroom. When I tried to talk, she said she was tired. When I asked if we were okay, she said, "Not now." You can feel when someone has already left you emotionally, even if they still sleep in the same house. Meanwhile, Tiffany kept checking in. Not constantly. Just enough. A text asking how my breathing was. A quick stop by with groceries. A short conversation that made me feel normal again. She never made me feel like a burden. One morning, after a rough night of barely sleeping, I walked into the kitchen and saw a manila folder on the table. My name was written on it in Ada's handwriting. I already knew what it was before I opened it. Divorce papers. No note. No conversation. Just signatures waiting for mine. I stood there staring at the pages, feeling something inside me go completely numb. Not anger, not even heartbreak, just a deep, quiet disbelief. The illness had taken my strength. The company had taken my job, and now my wife was taking herself out of my life too. I didn't cry. I just sat down at the kitchen table and realized that, somehow, in the middle of being sick and unemployed, I had also become disposable. After I found the divorce papers on the kitchen table, I sat there for almost an hour without moving. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel peaceful. It felt empty in a way I had never noticed before. I kept staring at my name printed across the top of the first page, like it belonged to someone else. When Ada finally walked into the kitchen, she didn't look surprised to see the folder open in front of me. She avoided my eyes and poured herself a glass of water like this was a normal morning. "So this is it?" I asked, my voice calm even though my chest felt tight. She nodded slightly. "I can't live like this, Luke." Like this. Those two words hit harder than anything else. Like my sickness had turned our marriage into something unbearable. "It's not about blame," she added quickly. "I just need a different kind of life." She didn't ask how I felt. She didn't ask if I was scared. She didn't even say my name again. After a few minutes, she grabbed her keys and left for work. I sat there alone with the papers. I wasn't thinking about fighting for the marriage. I wasn't thinking about convincing her to stay. I was thinking about how quickly everything had changed. A few months ago, we were eating dinner together, talking about small plans for the future. Now I was sitting at the same table, trying to understand how I became someone she could walk away from so easily. Later that afternoon, there was a knock at the door. It was Tiffany. She stepped inside slowly, like she already knew. Her eyes landed on the folder still sitting on the table. She didn't rush toward it. She didn't start talking fast or offering advice. She just pulled out a chair and sat across from me. "How are you holding up?" she asked softly. Something in her voice made the wall I'd been holding up finally crack. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just told her the truth. "I feel like I'm disappearing," I said, like I stopped being worth something the second I got sick. She didn't interrupt. She didn't defend her sister either. She just listened. Really listened. Her eyes stayed on mine the whole time. When I finished, she reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Not romantic, not dramatic, just steady. "You didn't deserve this," she said quietly, "and you're not facing it alone. I'm here." Those words landed differently than they had the first night she came over. Back then I was just scared. Now I was broken in a different way. And hearing someone say they weren't walking away felt like air filling my lungs again. Over the next few weeks, my health slowly started to stabilize. The fever faded. The chest tightness became less frequent. But my energy was still low. Some mornings I'd wake up thinking I could handle the day. By afternoon, I'd feel drained again. Tiffany became the one steady thing in my life. She didn't treat me like a patient. She treated me like a person. She would stop by after work with groceries or homemade soup, but she always made it feel casual. "I was in the neighborhood," she'd say, even though I knew she drove out of her way. One afternoon, she suggested we take a short walk around the block. The idea sounded impossible. I hadn't been outside much in weeks. "We'll go slow," she promised. The first few steps felt strange, like my legs didn't trust the ground anymore. We walked maybe 10 minutes total. By the end, I was tired, but it felt good. Fresh air. Sunlight. A conversation that wasn't about lawyers or doctor appointments. Those short walks became our routine. 10 minutes. Sometimes 15. She'd talk about her day at work, about random stories from her friends, about small things that felt normal. And slowly, I started talking more too. Not about the divorce, not about Ada, about me, about how scared I'd been when I couldn't breathe properly, about how ashamed I felt losing my job, about how I didn't recognize myself anymore. One day, while we were sitting on a bench halfway down the block, she looked at me and said, "You've always been a good man, Luke. A steady one. Not many people appreciate that." No one had said something like that to me in years, maybe ever. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded, but inside something shifted. At home, Ada was barely present. She came and went without much conversation. Some nights she didn't come home at all. I stopped asking questions. It was clear her decision had already been made. Instead of breaking me, the distance started to feel clarifying. I began picking up small remote tech jobs, simple troubleshooting tasks. The pay wasn't much, but it gave me structure. It reminded me I still had skills. I still had value. When I told Tiffany about completing my first small project, she smiled like I'd won something big. "That's progress," she said. "Real progress." No one else celebrated with me. No one else noticed. One rainy evening, she came over with paperwork for financial assistance programs she had researched on her own. "You don't have to do this," I told her. "I know," she replied calmly. "I want to." There was no pressure in her voice, no expectation, just sincerity. As the weeks passed, I found myself looking forward to her knock on the door. The house didn't feel so heavy when she was inside it. I laughed more. I stood a little straighter. I felt less like a burden. One night, after I finished a long shift working remotely, she showed up with a container of homemade chicken soup. "You sounded tired in your texts," she said with a small smile. We sat at the kitchen table while I ate. The same table where the divorce papers had once felt like a final sentence. At one point, we both reached for the same glass of water. Our hands brushed for just a second. It was small, accidental, but neither of us pulled away immediately. She cleared her throat softly and looked down for a moment before meeting my eyes again. "Luke," she said carefully, "I don't want you to think I'm stepping into something that isn't mine, but I care about you more than I expected to." My heart didn't race. It didn't feel dramatic. It felt steady. She wasn't asking for anything. She wasn't trying to replace anyone. She was simply being honest. "I don't want to replace anyone," she added gently. "I just want you to know you matter to me." For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was fading. I felt seen. After that night, nothing changed overnight. There were no sudden confessions, no dramatic shifts, but something between us had been acknowledged, and that made everything feel clearer. Tiffany didn't pull away after telling me how she felt. She also didn't move closer in a way that felt forced. She kept showing up the same way she always had, steady, kind, present. My health continued to improve slowly. By early spring, I could get through a full day without needing to lie down in the middle of it. The doctor cleared me for light work, and after weeks of applications, I landed a small remote position with a tech support company based in Chicago. The pay wasn't impressive, but it was stable. It felt like standing on solid ground again. When I told Ada about the job, she just nodded. No smile, no congratulations. It was like we were roommates discussing utility bills. 2 weeks later, the official divorce filing came in the mail. I held the envelope in my hands for a long time before opening it. I expected pain. I expected anger. Instead, I felt something quieter. Acceptance. When I signed the preliminary documents, it didn't feel like I was losing my marriage. It felt like I was putting a name to something that had already ended months ago. That evening, Tiffany came over. She noticed the stack of papers immediately, but she didn't rush toward them. She set down the bag of groceries she brought and looked at me. "Rough day?" she asked gently. I nodded. She didn't say anything else for a moment. She just sat down across from me at the kitchen table. The silence wasn't heavy. It was calm. "I guess this was coming," I finally said. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You deserved better than how things turned out." We ended up talking for almost 2 hours. Not about Ada. Not about blame. We talked about work. About my health. About small goals for the next few months. Tiffany had a way of focusing on what was ahead instead of what was lost. At one point, she made me laugh. It caught me off guard. I hadn't realized how long it had been since I laughed without forcing it. As she stood to leave, she paused near the door. "You've handled all of this with more strength than you realize," she said. After she left, I stayed up thinking about that. Strength wasn't something I felt, but maybe surviving quietly counted for something. Over the next few days, her visits became a little more frequent. Not overwhelming, just consistent. We started having coffee together in the mornings, on weekends. We went on longer walks now that I had more energy. I began noticing small things about her that I hadn't paid attention to before. The way she remembered details from our conversations. The way she listened fully without checking her phone. The way she smiled when I talked about rebuilding my career. One night, after a long remote shift, I was exhausted. Around 7 in the evening, Tiffany texted asking if I needed anything from the store. I told her I was fine. 20 minutes later, she knocked on the door anyway, holding a warm container of soup. "You still sound tired," she said with a small smile. We sat at the kitchen table again. That table had seen every version of me this past year. Sick, scared, abandoned, and now slowly rebuilding. As I ate, we talked about nothing important, just everyday things. The kind of conversations that make a house feel alive. At one point, she grew quiet. "Luke," she said carefully, "I don't want you to feel pressured by anything I said before." I looked up at her. "I meant it," she continued. "I care about you. But I also know you've been through a lot. I don't want to be another thing you have to figure out." Her honesty was steady, not emotional or dramatic. That's what made it matter. "I don't feel pressured," I said slowly. "I just feel surprised." "By what?" "By how much it means that you stayed." She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me in a way that felt open and unguarded. That night, after she left, I sat alone, thinking about everything that had happened over the past year. Losing my job. Losing my health. Losing my marriage. But in the middle of all that loss, there had been one constant. Her. A few days later, I drove to the courthouse alone to sign the final divorce documents. The process was simple, quick, 15 minutes, and it was done. Ada didn't show up. When I walked back to my car, I expected to feel crushed. Instead, I felt lighter, not happy, not relieved in a dramatic way. Just lighter. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw Tiffany's car already parked there. She stepped out as I turned off the engine, holding a small bag of groceries. "I figured today might be tough," she said softly. I didn't try to act strong. I just nodded and unlocked the door. Inside, she made tea while I sat at the table. The same place where I had once felt disposable. "How do you feel?" she asked. I thought about it. "Lighter," I answered. "Tired, but okay." She smiled gently. "You deserve to feel okay again." As the evening went on, the space between us felt different. Not tense, not uncertain, just open. She moved her chair a little closer. "I don't expect anything from you," she said. "I just want you to know that whatever happens next, I'm not going anywhere unless you ask me to." I held her gaze. "I don't want to rush," I said honestly, "but I don't want to ignore what's been growing either." Her smile was small, but real. "Then we take it slow," she said, "really slow." For the first time in a long time, the future didn't scare me. It felt possible. The weeks after the divorce settled into something steady, not perfect, not dramatic, just steady. My job became more consistent. I handled more support tickets, joined team calls, and slowly felt my confidence return. My body felt stronger too. I could walk longer distances without stopping. I could get through a full day without feeling like I might collapse by evening. For the first time in a year, I felt like I was rebuilding instead of surviving. Tiffany and I didn't announce anything. We didn't label what we were doing. We simply spent time together. Coffee on Sunday mornings, short dinners at quiet restaurants in town, long walks through the neighborhood where the air felt fresh and open. We talked about real things, not just the past year but the future, work goals, travel ideas, the kind of conversations that feel hopeful instead of heavy. There was no pressure between us, no urgency, just two people choosing to sit beside each other. One evening, we were sitting on my porch watching the sunset. The sky was soft shades of orange and blue, It was quiet, except for the distant sound of cars passing on the main road. She was sitting close enough that our shoulders touched lightly. Not forced, just natural. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. "For what?" I asked. "For not letting everything break you." I looked down at my hands for a moment. There was a time when I thought I had been broken beyond repair. Losing my health, my job, my marriage, all at once had felt like too much for one person to carry. "I didn't do it alone," I said. She didn't respond with words. She just rested her head gently against my shoulder. That simple gesture meant more than any dramatic confession ever could. A few days later, I ran into Ada at a grocery store. It was the first time we'd seen each other since the divorce was finalized. She looked different. Not better or worse. Just distant. We exchanged polite greetings. She asked how my health was. I told her I was doing better. She nodded and said she was glad. There was no anger left in me, no bitterness. Just a quiet understanding that we had chosen different paths. When I walked out of that store, I didn't feel regret. I didn't feel the need to look back. That night, Tiffany came over for dinner. I told her about running into Ada. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said honestly, "I am." And I meant it. Later, as we cleaned up the dishes together, our hands brushed again. This time, neither of us pulled away. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized something had shifted fully inside me. This wasn't just gratitude anymore. It wasn't just comfort. It was love. Quiet, steady love built through hard days and honest moments. "I don't want to take this slow forever," I said gently. She froze for a second, searching my face. "I don't either," she admitted. There was no grand speech, no dramatic music playing in the background. Just the kitchen light above us, and the soft sound of water running in the sink. I reached for her hand, and she let me hold it. "I'm not looking for someone perfect," I said. "I'm looking for someone who stays." Her eyes filled slightly, but she smiled. "I stayed," she whispered. "And I see you," I replied. A few months later, we started officially dating. We kept it simple. No rush to move in together, no sudden changes. We let things grow the way they had started. Naturally, steadily. My health fully returned by the end of summer. I found a better remote position with stronger pay and more responsibility. For the first time in a long while, I felt secure again. But this time I understood that stability doesn't come from a paycheck or a title. It comes from who stands beside you when everything falls apart. One evening, almost a year after the day I found those divorce papers on the table, Tiffany and I sat in the same kitchen where my life once felt like it was collapsing. The room felt different now, warmer, lived in. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm here," she said softly, the same words she had spoken the night everything started to break. This time they didn't feel like reassurance. They felt like a promise. And I realized something important. Getting sick didn't ruin my life. Losing my job didn't destroy me. Even the divorce didn't end my story. All of it led me to the person who chose to stay when staying wasn't easy. And sometimes, that's where real love begins. I create these stories with effort and love, and your single like gives me real motivation.
I hope you enjoyed today's tale. What are your thoughts about the story? Please tell me in the comments and subscribe, like, and share my channel.